Welcome to another Love Ignites Peace Book Club Edition podcast. Tonight we are discussing the book Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav. And this has been a really wonderful book for all of us to read, I think. So we are excited to get into it. Teresa, show us your copy that has fallen apart.
Well, apparently I have loved this book. I don't know if you can see all my markers. It fell apart. It's in sections. I was flipping and turning and going. There's my love story with Seat of the Soul.
Well, this book was first published in 1989. Is that an original edition?
I don't think so. I believe I picked this up after RJ was born, and he was born in 1990. So I'm going to say maybe 1993, 94, whenever he was on Oprah. I don't even know when that was. That's really when I think I had read it and then followed it with that.
Well, let's do a quick check-in. How is everybody? Anything new from the last time we have met? We are sadly without Jenna tonight. She was not able to make it.
Sending a little shout out.
Yes, we love her. We miss her.
Yeah.
So I know, Teresa, you and Noelle have both had some astrological readings with Drew Lawrence.
Yes, I feel like I'm in the club now.
Welcome to the good life, Teresa. The good club.
It's cool. Noelle, you just had yours, right?
Right. And I loved it. It was so confirming, and there were some eye-opening moments and some that makes sense moments. So that was really great. I enjoyed every minute of it.
His reading, it was so precise. Like he could go right into the month, the day, the year. I'm like, oh my God. Like, does he have a magic mirror into, yes, that's exactly when. So I really liked how precise on the dates and everything it was. Thank you, Paige and Ashlyn, for circling that out to us. It was cool.
For those of you that are listening that don't know what we're talking about, Drew Lawrence is a Vedic astrologer, and we actually recorded a podcast with him on season 2, episode 22. Your life is not random, it's written in the stars. If you haven't taken a listen, we'd highly recommend. His astrological guidance, as Teresa said, is so spot on. And he actually uses the astrology that astronomers work from, which is a little bit different than some of our Western astrology. It's really life-changing when you can understand really what's happening in your chart and how it's influencing the relationships in your life, your career, your path. And then when you can understand what's going on, you can align and then flow a little more easily.
Yeah, I thought there was great value in it.
He also tells some great stories. So we'll just leave that as a little hook. So we should probably jump right in and get to the book. Ashlyn, would you like to read the description of Seat of the Soul?
Yes, I would. The Seat of the Soul encourages you to become the authority in your own life. It will change the way you see the world, interact with other people, and understand your own actions and motivations. Gary Zukav takes you on a penetrating exploration of the new phase humanity has entered. We are evolving from a species that understands power as the ability to manipulate and control purely from our animalistic self, external power, into a species that understands power as the alignment of the personality with the soul, authentic power. Our evolution requires each of us to make the values of the soul our own: harmony, cooperation, sharing, and reverence for life. Using his scientist's eye and philosopher's heart, Zukav shows how to participate fully in this evolution, enlivening our everyday activities and all of our relationships with meaning and purpose. What did you guys think about the book? What did you like? What did you dislike? What are a couple things you learned?
Noelle, you're all smiling.
Right. I loved the book, and I've had it this is probably one of the first books I read along my spiritual journey. And I think because I saw him on Oprah Super Soul Sunday, because I think she had him back. And so I grabbed that. So sometime in the last 10 years or so. And I actually have loaned out my hard copy. So I also had it on my Kindle. So I love it. When I first read it, I looked at it through the lens of this is all new. And now that I understand so much more just throughout my span of my spiritual journey, which has been my whole life, but in the last 10 years, this time when I read it, I just understood at a totally different level what was happening. And it's so interesting because written in 1989, but still is so pertinent for today. Like amazingly so. So it withstands time. So some things that I've learned from this book that I know now, but really brought to the surface is that my intentions are the power behind everything that I do. It's all driven by my intentions. And I really look at that in my life of being a people pleaser for many, many years. And if that was my intention, it was very inauthentic. Very, very inauthentic because it was really about the other person instead of me showing up to the truth of who I am. And I was really trying to play a role to someone else. So that was just that reminder of that I wasn't in my power and my intentions behind it were not true. And the other part that I take away that is just, it's so important in our interactions with others is understanding that hurt people are the people that shows up in their life. And instead of judging or being harsh, it's really just opening your heart and loving them no matter what, because you know that they're hurting and you know that they're unable to like show the love or show up maybe in the loving way that we want them to. But we can know that and love it and accept it. And I think that's so important, especially when we interact with, I'm a teacher, so I'm constantly interacting with people all day long, large amounts of people, and just keeping that in mind so that I can be really compassionate and keep my heart open. So those are my two big things that I learned throughout this. Although I will say, I know part of the question was like, do I wish I could have applied it to my life before? And I don't think so. I believe our lives unfold beautifully and magically. And if I went back and changed something, it would change it all. So I wouldn't change a thing. And I wouldn't tell my younger self this. The magic of it unfolding is perfect. So I love the book.
Well, I too love the book, as you can see. Again, kind of the same, but a different twist on what Noelle said. For me personally, I found much more reading it this time because I haven't read it since, like I said, probably 1993 or whatever. So that's been a long time. So first of all, I want to thank both of you for picking this book again. So often we read something and once you read it, you kind of put it aside. And this is a really important collection of thoughts and ideas and perspectives and information. And I truly believe if everybody could read this book more than once, because we almost like every so many years, we morph into something else through experience and who we're around and all those beautiful things of life. I would recommend really about every 5 years picking it up and rereading it because we're different. We just evolved so much. And I can't thank you enough, really, for picking it so I could delve in and revisit where I am now and reflect on all those unfoldings. It's so important. And I think that's where the authenticity comes in, is recognizing who we are and how we evolve and who we are right now. And we're the same. I don't mean to say we're not, but you do get more compassion. You do learn to love differently because we all know love is an action. You learn to love without judgment, with compassion, with honor, with respect. And for me, I think that was a big tool that some validation came out of with this book. So would I want to know and go back? I did say yes. I would find this book very helpful in a environment of teaching. It would have been very helpful for me about 8th, 9th, 10th grade, somewhere in that period. As a real study of certain concepts, mostly intuition and learning what that was. As a young woman, I would have liked to know more about that. And what voices am I self-talking? Who's talking back when I look at in the mirror and in the 8th grade, my hair's parted down the middle and I have a pimple? You know what I mean? So that's a little bit where I would not agree so much with Noelle. I would find parts of that so helpful to boys and girls getting into high school, just tapping into a little bit more understanding of that. Maybe not the whole concept, but certainly I think it would be helpful.
Teresa, as I was reading it, I was thinking about all the things that I could use now within the context of wellness. However, I did think back when I was in school, I don't know if the world was ready for that. But I do think we're closer to it now. So I think I agree with that sense. But yeah.
Yeah. And really, is any eighth grader, 9th grader really ready for? Maybe not. But I would have liked to have been given the opportunity.
Well, I think it's just such a cool thing to be introducing some of these concepts.
Yeah.
And I know, Noelle, you do that in your classroom with elementary students. But just introducing these concepts opens them up or plants the seed when they're ready to take it and run with it.
So it's interesting that you had seen Gary, the author, on Oprah, because it sounds like you guys have a little bit older copies, but I ended up doing the Audible book, and Oprah and my Angelo had a foreword to the book. So it was really cool to have that teed up, especially as people that are really well respected for their ideas, their thoughts, their outlooks. And I was intrigued. I was curious how it was going to go. And I actually ended up really enjoying the book. I would say it's a little bit different compared to some of the other books that are more of a story that you're like, ooh, I'm really enjoying the book because this is a fun read. But I enjoyed the book from the perspective of everything that it actually discussed. And I had told my mom that I kind of wish that we could have started our entire Love Ignites Peace book club with this book. Because this sums up so much of what we talk about. From intuition to frequency to energy to divine support. And it made it so digestible and so clearly understandable. Honestly, if there was a book that really summarizes like my beliefs, this would be one of those books where I'm like, oh my goodness, like this encapsulates so many things that we have come to learn and to know over the last 16 years of exploration. And it's really an amazing resource, I think, for someone if they're starting out. The question is, and what I wish that we could hear from Jenna would be, not that she's just freshly starting out, but it's not like she's necessarily been 16 years into this idea of frequency and energy. And I would have loved to have heard from her, how did it land being a little bit fresher to some of these ideas? If you were just coming a little bit, I don't want to say blind, because that's not a fair representation of where her background is, how would you be feeling? So I have several friends that I would like to gift this book to help on their spiritual journey. And the last thing I'll say before passing it over is I think that it was a beautiful merging also of science and spirituality in one of the simplest, most straightforward ways that literally, not that you need to be armed for an argument about spirituality, but that it actually gave concrete scientific things that I feel very prepared that I could speak with someone and be like, oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, do you realize that everything you believe is truth in science right now was actually at some point something that someone had to investigate? It was a non-believed idea that had to then be hypothesized, researched. You know, like he talked about the atom. We can't see the atom, but someone had to say there's something smaller, there's something smaller. And now, as we have started to understand this physical plane, the next level is the non-physical, which is what we're talking about in the spiritual. But Newton's laws that he talks about in the book still apply to the non-physical. They are non-physical manifestations in the physical. So I can get into that later, but I think it is one of those things that this book is a beautiful middle ground that I think can hit for a lot of people.
I agree with you.
Thank you. And from what I have known when I was younger, honestly, like I have been learning a lot of these things for a while. So I think I'm kind of in a middle ground between what Noelle said and Teresa said, because I don't think I could have been ready for it probably without some of my experiences in the path that led me here. But also if I could have been 12 years old and be like, hey, karma's not somebody judging me. Karma's literally every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So
It's very
let's keep that in
scientific.
mind.
It
Very
almost
scientific.
it takes the emotion out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I read this again about the karma. That was one of my best chapters that I really revisiting it got the most out of was the karma. It just was so scientific that, again, wow, just you can step back and understand the energy of it.
Yeah, it's no longer just a theory. It's not like, oh, we've read in Buddhism and all of us are like, have gone in the spiritual exploration and we're like, yeah, we're open to these teachings. Yeah, let's talk about karma. Oh, yeah. But then it's like, no, there's really not, like, talking about karma in this book doesn't feel like oh yeah, let's lean into this, like the Bhagavad Gita and the, it's like literally like, no, like this is just Newton's law, physical, like manifestation, the non-physical plane, like that everything is energy and it makes total and perfect sense. Like,
Universal law.
Reaction. Yep. So like, wow, let's we don't need to get into some mystical conversation. Really, it just is pretty simple.
That leads me to really one of my most profound thoughts about this book was I love the simplicity of it. Maybe that doesn't sound like a very profound thought, but everything was written with such simplicity and such clarity. And I thought that was just really a wonderful thing for the reader when you're introducing. He introduced a plethora of concepts. He didn't just introduce one thing. And we're talking about karma, intuition, reincarnation, power, trust. I mean, he had a intention. He had a huge gamut of topics that he introduced. And he did this in a way that one just built on the other and built on the other and built on the other. And I thought that was really a very wise thing that he did and how he wrote this for the reader. I really like this book. I don't think if I would have read this book in 1990, I would have gotten a thing out of it, honestly, because I was just not ready for those concepts. They were too foreign to me at that time. I just didn't understand them. But reading it now, I mean, so much of what he's saying is really, I mean, it's love ignites peace. It really, truly is. And something that I really wish that, I guess I wish I would have known when I was younger, is that our human journey is truly a journey of the soul. And we've so forgotten that. Well, it's not that we've forgotten, I guess. I guess it's just that we were not taught that in any way, shape, or form. Everything was, again, in this very tangible, physical sense, which honestly created a lot of suffering for us individually and as a collective. And when we really look at this idea that true healing takes place when we realize that what needs healed is at a soul level beyond the physical, that healing at a soul level actually heals the physical. I mean, that concept alone, if we can really embody it, can create an entirely different experience for each of us individually and all of us collectively.
I found it interesting, and even in today's world, so many experiences, and you could throw in religion with it, or education, or just friends and whatever. It's almost like the soul is over here and we're here, this physical human body, when really they are one and the same. Where's the friendship and the knowing of self and soul as a best friend, not something separate, as a best friend? And for me, that's another layer revisiting this book of my journey, being best friends, really trusting and listening to that soul, it makes you one.
You know, I think one of the biggest disservices that we've done to our Western culture is that we wrote reincarnation off like it was something that absolutely didn't exist. And he talks about in this book the idea that your soul has many experiences and goes on and on and on and comes back with these many different experiences. I actually went and looked this up, but it was, I think, 543 AD is when Christianity wrote reincarnation out of the doctrine. And prior to that, it was in the doctrine. And the big disservice, in my opinion, is that it disconnected us truly from the journey of our soul and the authenticity of who we truly were. This idea we get one shot, it's, make it or break it, suffer, sin, all of that. And the reality is we have many opportunities to come back and balance what he's calling karma in this book.
I think that was your mic drop moment, because I think that 100% what you just said, it disconnection from our soul's journey. And I think that that's what so many people struggle with. That complete and total feeling of not understanding their purpose, why they're here, why they're going through hard things. I mean, when you understand your soul's journey, it puts so many of the puzzle pieces together.
100%, which actually really leads us nicely to the next question. He says this on page 16. When a personality comes to fully serve the energy of its soul, that is authentic empowerment. What does that mean to you after reading this book? And, we've all, I think all of us, Ashlyn included at only 27 years old, has been on this journey of authentic empowerment of the soul. But what did that really mean to you after reading this book?
For me, authentic empowerment is living intentfully, really. And I break that down to, I'm going to give a gift to somebody. What's the intent? Some people use gift giving as a power play, as a control. Some people give a gift because if I give a bigger, better gift, they'll like me more. So a lot of little microscopic things, I look at what is my intent. And through that, me, and I can power through life, so to speak, because I don't get so, it's just truth. So I know it probably sounds a little weird, but I do think intentfully about a lot of it's all the little things that equal a big thing. And so intent is where I find my authentic power. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I think that's a really hard question to answer, actually. I think, the biggest understanding for me, again, for those that are listening that haven't read the book, he talks about your personality, not as in a negative thing. Like, I love my personality, but he uses the word personality as a separate thing from your soul. And a personality is something that you just have in this life. And from this personality, you kind of live from the third dimensional, this plane, let's say just lower version of yourself, where your higher self version is your soul. Which, 10-second side note, this is another thing I loved about the book. I felt like it put these pieces. Everyone's always talking about your higher self, but what in the heckarooski is your higher self? And the way he put it is your higher self is your soul. Like, why do we overcomplicate this? Like, why do we make it so hard to understand, And I think that we do, because it's probably more nuanced in some ways, right? We as humans try to simplify things, but neither here nor there. I love the simplification in this for clarity and understanding. So anyways, going back to the question around personality, serving its soul, that's authentic empowerment. What does that mean to you after reading this book? It just means being more aware of what is my soul speaking and what is my ego or my personality. And when you are living from the soul, your decisions are way more powerful. That is kind of how it feels. I know that doesn't sound like revolutionary, but it's like, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. You're kind of pretending to be in power from your personality, but you're actually in power from your soul. There you go. It's a hard question.
It is, but you guys are wise gurus. I am excited to hear what you have to say about this. So Noelle, take it away.
Okay, so in my mind, I think of it, my personality is like my ego consciousness, my When I make decisions from that, I'm looking for the accolades. I'm looking for noticing. I'm looking for acknowledgement. I just come from a different perspective. But when I marry my personality with my soul consciousness, that the purpose that I'm here, and I understand that, and I'm looking at it from the lens of not just myself, I'm looking at it from the lens of the whole, the oneness of us all, that I'm not trying to be better than, I'm not trying some of those things that my ego consciousness, my personality might be after. When I marry those together, then I am more authentic. I am living my higher purpose. I'm acting from clarity of that purpose versus trying to prove myself to the world. I'm more intentional with everything I do, and becoming more self-actualized is another term that we might toss around. Not necessarily that he used that the entire time, but I'm living authentically. And then when I do that, here's the beautiful thing. When I do that, then I'm open and receptive to guidance from my soul, and I can hear that guidance, and I'm more in tune with my guidance. So
I love that. I was going to tag on something that I think ties in. I think you and I are on the same page pretty closely with this. I actually think the personality, when it thinks that it's empowered, it's actually giving your power away in a lot of ways. Because our personality tells us that person wronged me. I have to go right this. I need justice. And then the soul is where you're actually empowered, where you can say, whoa, from the soul level, I can see this for what it really is. So it's like the false empowerment versus the actual empowerment, which is what we're talking about, authentic empowerment.
right. And he talks about how the ego, or the personality, I'll use his words, the personality is really seeking outside, and your soul is an inside. And I think that's really the big difference.
Yep. Amen.
Well, I decided to take some notes from the book actually answering this question. So I'm going to read you the bullet points that I wrote down from the book on how he describes authentic power, which would be different than the misuse of power, which so oftentimes results from our personality operating out in the day-to-day world. So bullet points: authentic power loves life in every form. Authentic power does not judge, perceives meanings and purpose from even the smallest details, which I think is so important. Like, you're really looking to your life, like, why is this happening? What is the meaning behind this? Incapable of making anything or anyone a victim, which I thought was a really big, powerful one as well. Because as a soul, you essentially take responsibility for all of your experiences. So empowered that force against another is not a part of your consciousness. And the last one was basically just an authentic power is aligning the personality with the soul, which I think you guys definitely touched on.
So with everything we just talked about, we used some examples of authentic empowerment, false empowerment, all the things we just discussed. Has reading this book affected your relationship with yourself, or how you view others in our collective human community? I kind of feel like it ties in to what we just talked about when you're in this authentic empowerment.
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've been trying to align my soul with my personality even more and more as I progress through this lifetime. But I find that this little miracle happens where all of a sudden you're in a different spot and you don't even know how or why that occurred. But it is reading books like this. I know that my soul is like, yes, she picked up the book, you know? So I think it's all those little pieces that come into my life. And I notice it so much more in the classroom, where I know an idea in my mind, but actually putting into practice and then aligning it with my everyday, my personality, with my soul, is you just start to recognize, like was said earlier, I don't know if it was Paige or Ashlyn said, that you no longer are even judge, or you aren't allowed, you don't put people in victims. You can't even look at them in a victim role. And I know for a long time as a teacher, as an educator, we want to save everyone. And I think that's probably why we go into the field, is that codependent, I'm going to save you. And that's what starts off in the field. And then, there's this breaking down of recognizing that you can't, and then it breaks your heart. And then once your heart is open, you realize, I can't, because it's not my job. And you have to walk through your life to come to your own realization. And you may have, there's belief, and I do believe we sign up for this ahead of time. And if I know that, then I don't have to save you, because you're going to save yourself. And the moment I try to jump in and do it, unless it's written in the stars, the moment I try to do it, I don't think we really can mess with, because it's all aligned, but it just takes the pressure off of trying to save. So it just goes back to my inner life is showing up in alignment with my outer life.
Noelle, I think that was your mic drop moment.
Oh, thank you.
I love it.
Yeah, it's so true. We're so programmed, honestly, to rescue and to save. And I do believe that was a very important part of this book, is that everyone does have their own journey. It is not your job to save them. As a compassionate, loving person, you are there to love and support and have empathy and compassion and all of those things. But you're actually robbing a person of their experience if you don't allow them to have the experience that they're here to have. They can't balance their karma if we keep jumping in and saving. And honestly, I think that really, since I'm talking here, I'll just go forward. But I really think that is such an important concept that came out of this book in how we view ourselves and others, is that, and I write about this in Love Ignites Peace, Our Next Evolution. We are all here to have experiences. And it is so important that we allow others to have their experience, support them in every way we can, but not change their experience for them.
I would take it a step further. I completely agree with what you're saying about allowing people to have the experience. And one of my takeaways that I had noted here about how it's affected my relationship, this book affected my relationship with myself and the collective community, is understanding everything you guys just touched on, that there are no victims, which I know that might be a really triggering statement for some people. And I honor why that would be triggering, very much so. And it's easy from the seat here to make that statement. But the principle in the book that he shared is just this idea, again, as we already discussed with karma, every action having an equal and opposite reaction. Your soul is learning something, healing something, mending something, and transcending something through that trauma. A karma is being righted. And so from a bird's eye view, it gives me a different perspective on world events. It gives me a different perspective on things that can really feel painful to the collective. So just tagging off of what you were saying with that, Mom.
It puts blame in a different category. Mm-hmm. And we spend a lot of time blaming. And I am going to sit here and say there are people who have suffered atrocities that no human being should ever suffer. And, there may be more to that than what we're talking about here with this particular book. But the normal everyday life that all of us live is an authentic life when we don't blame, shame, rescue, all these things that we've just been talking about.
And we're saying that from a very high level, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're not, again, like my mom said, there's just because your soul might even be going through the learning process doesn't mean it wasn't an experience that you were a victim, that you truly went through something horrible. So you kind of have to delineate between the karmic soul side of, air quotes, not being a victim versus the actual human experience of that feeling like a true victim experience. So there is definitely a difference. Another thing, just as I'm rolling off of this, kind of like you rolled forward, Mom, I want to roll forward with this idea of my main takeaway in regards to looking at humanity differently was his commentary about darkness versus light and how more darkness does not bring light to darkness, right? So if someone is dark, if something is dark that you don't like or you don't appreciate or you don't approve of, your darkness does not help that heal that soul or our world. The only thing that will help the collective or that individual is light. Even if you might not agree, your judgment, your shame does not bring light to that darkness. So love and light is the only way to heal and to transcend darkness. And I think of that even in your most difficult relationships. Continuing to judge, continuing to hold a grudge, continuing to hate, continuing to wish bad things for someone does not help heal your feelings about it. It does not heal them. It does not heal the situation. It only is more darkness. So from a takeaway perspective, if there's any situation with another person that might not be sitting right with me, I would like to bring a more loving, light-filled perspective, because that is what can bring healing if healing is possible.
Yeah. You know, we didn't talk about the chapter on light, and I don't know what you guys thought, but that was honestly one of my favorite chapters.
Absolutely. I mean, that everyone should read that chapter. It just is like so good.
Every chapter was so good. What
True.
about the section of addiction? How many people in this world are dealing with someone or some form, whether it's close or, you know, a distant, with all kinds of addictions? That was a huge, honestly, read the book, you guys, because it just, you could spend so much time really delving into each, the karma, the addiction, the light, honestly, it could be a year-long syllabus course, honestly.
Yeah,
it's like a
absolutely.
deep dive. Mm-hmm.
And something we haven't talked about within this is it's 100%, as my mom said earlier, love ignites peace. Frequency and energy was woven throughout the entirety of this book. Your intention is an energy that empowers light, which is, you know, your intention is a consciousness that empowers light into creation. Nothing is created without consciousness. Well, that consciousness is an energy. It just all, I mean, every single one of these chapters, I'm like zooming through my notes here, and it's just like energy, 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 frequency, frequency, frequency. Like, this is so affirming in everything that we've shared and we've talked about so far. Even, really quickly, even about the divine support. We spent a while discussing the idea that there is support out there. And instead of just having to have faith and trying to understand this concept that there are some angels and beings and masters and teachers out there, like, you know, bringing some messages through spiritual energy work or there to protect you. You know, some people I think have a hard time wrapping their head around this. He literally talks about it as a being that just literally is on a different frequential plane. Like, their frequency is just a completely different level in which we can't see. But when you think about it from the science perspective, light, there's a whole spectrum of light, but we know scientifically, empirically, that the spectrum of light that we see is not the totality of spectrum of light. Mm-hmm. Just like the physical form that we can see is not the totality of form. And so, like, literally bringing this from a very grounded physical perspective to this non-physical perspective, it makes sense. It's like, no, duh, there's angels and beings around us that exist. Of course, they're just a higher frequency. We just can't see them. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. You guys, I was just like mind blown. I loved it. I thought it made everything we've talked about so empirical, tangible, understandable, digestible, and even shareable.
On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate this book? 5 being the best.
I knew you were going to ask me this. I am going to give it a 5. I think, honestly, if anybody is in any space where you're actually starting to explore spirituality, the world, your beliefs, energy, divine influence, yourself, your journey, like, a lot of points of connection can come from this book. And so I'm going to give it a 5. I think that everyone should read it. Again, it's not as fun as reading, you know, like a love letter life where there's a story in it, but it's powerful, but it's simple. And I would digest it like a podcast. One chapter while you're getting ready in the morning, and your frequency and your mind will just be expanded in so many ways. So yeah, 5. What about you, Noelle or Teresa or Mom?
I said a 5 as well. I mean, in all honesty, it's 100% life-changing. And when you read it again, it's 100% more life-changing. And every time you read it, like Teresa said, every 5 years, I don't know, even know if I'd wait that long, especially
Three or one.
Right. And if you have it on Audible, which I do, I mean, even if you just read one chapter or listen to one chapter, and I mean, you could do that on all year long, just continuing to read it over and over again. But I really think that no matter where you are, and this is why it's so much in alignment with Love Ignites Peace, is that no matter where you are, you can digest it. And then, it just gets more and more powerful. So no matter where you are on this path of understanding the non-physical, it gets deeper and creates a deeper and deeper understanding as you go.
You're making me excited to read it again in a year, 3 years, 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, what will we get out of it with 3, 5, 1 more year of evolution under our belt? Like, whoa.
I am giving Seed of the Soul a 5+. I think this is a handbook tool to have where you can grab it when something comes up and you ask, whatever stage of life you're in, why does that keep happening to me? How about reading the part about karma? Addictions. Why does so-and-so, what? Why does my friend's cousin have an alcohol or gambling? Well, there it is. The whole section on it. Addiction. You need some scientific, how does things work in this sphere of life? Well, geez, how about chapter in the section? Any question you have can really be found in this book. I would get it and I would keep it. And when you have a question, open it up. That's my recommendation.
Well, I too would give it a 5. And very succinctly, I will say it is an excellent entry-level book into the spiritual world. And it's a wonderful book when it has written in a way that it evolves with your evolution.
It's interesting because you just said it's an excellent entry-level book, which is amen, so true. And it's amazing because it transcends the fact that we all have been on the journey and we all love it. We're all giving it a 5. There's something in these pages.
Do you know what that something is?
No.
Authenticity, the truth. And when you hear it and you read it, I can't tell you how many times I'll read just a little 2 sentences and I would have tears trickling down my cheek. It's very emotional because that's what the truth does to us.
It's so funny. I literally my feet are tingling when you're saying that. That's why it transcends, because it's such a deep truth that our souls resonate with so deeply that it can find you at any time in your path. Mic drop. All 3 of you have had a mic drop moment tonight. I'm in the presence of geniuses.
Well, it speaks to your soul. It's a book about your soul that speaks to your soul.
One thing we didn't talk about yet, I know we're wrapping up, but one thing that I really loved is all about spiritual partnership. I love that idea of that shift of how we move away from, this I need you because the two of us creating a life is what's necessary versus helping our souls grow through that spiritual partnership. And anyway, I just really loved that part.
I did too, because I've been changing my little meditation mantras of putting to the universe to a spiritual partner.
Right.
A soul partner.
I'm going to take that one step further, because when I was reading that particular chapter, I thought, isn't that wonderful, a spiritual partner? But the reality is every single relationship in our life is a spiritual partnership. If we have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, that there is something bigger going on with every single relationship than what just meets the eye, than what our personalities are relaying to us.
Your second mic drop of the
You're so cute tonight. You've had several mic drops too, Shalini.
We might have already done our rating wrap up, but if there was one bit of wisdom that you haven't imparted yet, or if there's one bit of wisdom that you wish someone would walk away from this podcast with, what would it be?
No, you're not alone. You have a soul and you never walk alone.
You hold all the power in your life. And when you align with the soul, everything becomes magical.
You are so much more than what you think you are.
Dang, ladies, these are good. These are really good. I'm really good at asking the question, but maybe not having the answer prepared. You guys just have said so many wise things. I'm like, how do I even follow that? I would say that the something more that is out there from a spiritual level, from a soul level, from an energetic level is actually not that out there. It's right in front of our eyes. We just have to be open to it and recognize the physical principles that are also actually demonstrated in the spiritual, and know that everything that we believe today is truth, we once did not know. And so how can you stretch yourself to recognize that there is something you might not know that could become your truth, and that is a truth out there.
Mic drop moments.
Wow, that was a good one.
We finally got there. Woo! Yeah, there's a lot of pressure.
Thank you, everyone, for the conversation about this book. Listeners, if you have thoughts, please communicate with us on social media on what you thought about the book, your big takeaways. We would absolutely love to hear from you on that. Our next book is The Magic of Surrender by Kute Blackson. And I don't think it's a book that any of us have read before. I am really excited about it. But I'd like to leave you with a quote from Seat of the Soul as we end this podcast tonight. The center of the evolutionary process is choice. It is the engine of our evolution. What you choose with each action and each thought is an intention, a quality of consciousness that you bring to your action or your thought. And I would like to add, to your life. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to being with you next month as we discuss The Magic of Surrender by Kute Blackson.
Until then, get your freak on.
Get your freak on.